Okay, so I will call the WTA board meeting to order. We'll go ahead and do a roll call.
All right, thank you. Davidson.
Here.
Donovan.
Here.
And Hawkinson is absent. Cortez.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
I believe Mayor Lund is absent at the moment.
I'm here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I didn't see that. Executive Sadhu is absent. Williams.
Here.
And Darwin.
Present.
Thank you.
Great. So Ali is out today, so I will be leading the meeting. Is there any citizen communication, either via written? If there's anybody on Zoom that would like to communicate, please raise your hand, or in the boardroom.
Vicki, have we received any written communication last night?
No, we haven't.
Okay, so we have no written communication.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on, we are going to board action. D1, consideration of approval of contracts to Evergreen Workforce by Vanessa.
Morning, everyone. I'll just clarify that there's actually two recommendations with this board action. We recently went through an RFP to get HR consulting services as a regular contract. And we use this in a variety of ways. Usually it's for staff augmentation, and it's been pretty minimal over the past few years. This contract or the RFP process we went through allowed us to award to multiple vendors. And so the recommendations are that we actually select 2 vendors and award contracts to each. The first being Evergreen Consulting, and then the second being Org Shakers. There's no specific work order for either of these organizations yet. And we would work with each of them to develop task orders for the types of work. The things that you could expect for us to use this for are things like management level recruitment that we need additional HR staff to be able to focus on, our special projects. Again, there's no specific work plan for those items, and we'll be connecting with these folks to develop those if and when the time comes.
If I may, just procedurally, these contracts are under the general manager's authority, particularly one's $15,000, but combined and then potentially over the term of the contract, there's extension. Wanted to make sure the board was okay with where we were going. So that's why it's on for board approval.
Thank you.
I'll move approval of the contracts for Evergreen Workforce and Org Shakers. Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the contracts to Evergreen Workforce Consulting and Org Shakers for HR consulting and staff augmentation services. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to D2, consideration of approval of modifications to the fare rates and rules to align document with current practices. Audra?
Thank you, Jen. We're asking this morning for the board to approve some minor modifications and clarifications to the rates and rules. The current set of rates and rules was set in June 22, but there are a few changes that we wanted to outline, and they are around the interlocal agreement that we signed with Skagit Transit in September of 2020. They're enumerated here, and I won't read them all, but the main ones are that are free on fixed route passes, which means anyone who is paratransit eligible is also eligible for a free on fixed route pass so that they can ride within Whatcom County. And we have, we're proposing that we put that out to the ADX, the WTA ADX and the Skagit ADX to go inter-county. We no longer take tokens. It clarifies that our paratransit passes are monthly, like the calendar month, but our fixed route passes are 31 or 92 day. And so it's just making some of those clarifications and will be posted on our website. Any questions?
Strange question. Item WTA since the early 90s. I've never seen a brass token. What were those and how were they used?
Oh, I should have brought one. They're little brass bus tokens, and they look really similar to ones from all over the world, really. I can send you out a picture of them, but
The size of a nickel, I think.
dime,
Small
little
ones,
tiny,
yeah.
tiny ones, yes.
Since we have so many surplus, be happy to provide you.
Great.
All right, I'll move
I'll pick some
approval
up.
of the modification and fair rules, fair rates and rules. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consideration of approval of modification to the fair rates and rules to align document with current practices. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on, consideration of resolution 350-24, adjusting the board per diem compensation rate. Les.
Yes, good morning. So what we're asking the board to do is approve the resolution. Want to point out in there that the amount raising to 125 was in the middle of the current amount and the authorized statutory amount. So we picked a midpoint, but the board's free to choose what they want on that. So just for a little background on this, the RCW 3657A050 was changed in 2020 to tie salaries to a CPI standard as determined by OFM, State Office of Financial Management, every 5 years. That was starting as of January 24, so just last month. In your packet, you see the OFM, Office of Financial Management, recommendation based on CPI over the last 5 years. So they recommend, or they authorize going up to $161 per day with max compensation of $12,075 for board members, and then up to a maximum of $16,100 for the board share. In talking with other agencies that have done it, others are considering how it goes. It's a range. Some are tying it just directly to the statute. So whatever the statute and OFM say, then that's what they're doing. Others are picking a number like what's recommended here, and others it still hasn't been decided yet. So with that, you see in the background on your board cover sheet the history of the compensation for board members. So with that, I'll pause for questions. I know this is always a difficult one for board members to.
I would move approval. I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to for the consideration of resolution number, or actually to approve resolution number 350-24, adjusting the board per diem compensation rate. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. Thank you. Moving on now to consideration of resolution number 351-24, renewing the delegation of authority to the general manager. Les.
Yes, thank you, Jen. So last year we tried the pilot. The board approved a resolution outlining roles and responsibilities for the general manager, just to clarify where things were and make it very clear for everyone. We've got a year of experience. Last year we said we'd bring it back in a year to let you know how it went and seek renewal, and we will do so on an annual basis. So that's why it's here. Staff's input on this was that things were very helpful to be able to have those roles and responsibilities delineated. The only recommended change was on page 28 of your packet, you can see it in a track changes format, was to add a section on emergencies, just to make sure that if something does happen, it's clear the general manager has authority to institute. And then it also has in there that it will notify the board within 3 calendar days or the next board meeting, whichever is sooner. So with that, appreciate the last year and being able to have this. It was very helpful. and respectfully request renewing it for another year with the change. Move approval.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 351-24, renewing the delegation of authority to the general manager. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is passed. And we move on to consideration of approval of January 1st through 15, 2024 expenditures.
Move approval.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mayor Lund. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The expenditures are approved. We are now moving on reports to the board. Evaluation standards, Tim and Michael.
Hello, everyone.
Just real quickly leading into this, the evaluation standards, as you recall, are really kind of three. There's performance, design, and service standards. Thank you. And so talking about this, what we're hoping to do, we try to build some time into the agenda to have a robust discussion about these. As you'll recall, back summer of last year, we had discussion particularly about the service standards. Michael will kindly refresh and then move into performance standards. What we're hoping to do is bring this back for board approval, these standards, evaluation standards. In all honesty, they're targets and thresholds for us to start building from. They may not be perfect, but that's part of the point, is to see how they operationalize and how we can move forward, how we can learn and adjust as we go. So it's a starting point. I really appreciate Tim and Michael's efforts in pulling these together. It's been quite an effort, but I think will really move us forward in being able to understand how we're performing it, and then change policies as we need to address that. So with that, I'll shut up and turn it over to you.
Great. So on the board, I have the presentation that I'm going to run through. And as Les mentioned, I've run through the service standards, and we've gone through performance standards as well. And we've received some really, really good and robust feedback from the board, which has been put into consideration, and lots more effort went into digging deeper into different methods about target setting and just ways to look at previous data and set a way for us to, like Les said, move forward and have something that, some standards that we feel will put us in the right direction. Again, as mentioned, there's the three different standard types. We have service standards. All of them kind of address different questions. Service standards address the question, are WTA transit services connecting the community members, especially priority populations, to places they need to be at the times they need to be there. Performance standards address how efficiently is WTA operating, and how often our transit service is being utilized, how reliable are those transit services. And then design standards is addressing questions about the WTA system and associated infrastructure. Is all of that accessible in a design and in a way that prioritizes equity and efficiency? We have our 4 different route typologies. Our service standards will be separated out by these because they all operate in different environments. And it's not to say single routes operate in different environments as well, but we just group these together as we feel that the standards would be better split up this way. So just going right into it, I'm going to do, again, background on the service standards because we've been through it numerous times, but then a quick summary. So we have frequency and span. Frequency is, how often the buses are running, and in providing more frequent service can reduce layover time, improve round trip experience, increase overall usability of the route. So the top table there I can, I don't know how to get that out of the way.
But controls, oh. We'll minimize that little flat bar.
Here we have to do that, sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Great, so the top table is going to be the frequency targets that we have, and we have that broken down by peak, midday frequency, and then evening and weekend frequency. And then the bottom table is going to be service span. So when we're considering operation hours of the areas that we're serving, so think about our urban villages and areas that have retail areas or downtown. You know, how long is our service provided there? Are we able to get our essential workers to work on time, and are we able to take them home from work? So we have set targets for service span as well. Then we created the priority population index. So to assess the level at which WTA is serving our priority populations, we mapped the distribution of those populations within Whatcom County, and then compared the populations served by each route to those county averages. So an index was created to rate each route from 0 to 3. 0 meaning the route does not exceed any priority population target, and 3 meaning it exceeds all of them. So we have an example here for Route 232, and each of the priority population targets are met by the 232. So the minority, low-income population, and zero-vehicle households. And sorry, before I scroll on, we have a target for the priority population index, 2 out of 3 of the population groups. And then access to opportunity, to assess how well WTA is providing access to different services throughout our county. We mapped all the essential services, including childcare, colleges, groceries, libraries, medical facilities, schools, senior centers, shopping, larger shopping areas, and then social services as well. And then this one also considers employment density. And again, an index was created to assess how each route, the number of services each route is providing access to, and the employment density within that area. So we have an example on the board here for the Route 533. And as you can see, it does not meet our overall access to opportunity index target of 6 out of 10 of the different services. And this table is a little bit small to see, but get that out of the way too. So in the highlighted zone, you can see the different services that is providing access to. But when you go to a route like the 331, where it goes through these areas that have larger concentrations of essential services and higher employment density throughout the entire route, and you get an overall higher score. Okay, so that was service standards, and now going on to performance standards. Just to run through what we're going to be looking at really quick, we have our 4 performance standards. We're going to have targets and thresholds for each of those, and I'll go through on what that means here. So we felt that a sort of range, right, would be really good. So our targets alert us to start monitoring different services, looking at specific weaknesses and constraints to identify potential solutions. But the thresholds, they signify our lowest acceptable level of performance for each measure and signify the need for more immediate attention. So once you get below the target, then you're kind of in the yellow, but getting below the threshold puts you, in the red for more immediate attention. So there are numerous ways to set these targets and goals. We did a lot of background research after our last meeting to look at different ways to set these to kind of be more growth oriented. So there's the peer-based targets. So looking at our partner agencies around the state, there's system average targets, which we had utilized before, but that was kind of putting us in a place where we highlight the same routes over and over again because, we're looking at, the average of our own transit agency. And then we have policy informed. So this is the route that we went with, and that's just utilizing historical data, looking back deep, and setting targets based off of a specific goal, right? We want to grow, we want our routes to be performing well, but we also want to be realistic. So we set our targets that way. We also looked into percent change targets. So, but this is a really difficult time to start utilizing that, given we just went through a pandemic and ridership was severely low. So using percent change it might work in the future, but as of right now, it's not a great way to set our targets. So we have examples. I'm going to go through examples from January to September 2023. On the right-hand side, you will see, okay. Well, first we'll go into this. I was trying to do like a little background, but it's kind of tough with this first chart. So boardings per revenue hour. So this is the trend over the last 5 years. Just as a background into boardings per revenue hour, it's an effective measure for productivity, allowing WTA to assess system and route efficiency. Higher boardings per hour rates are anticipated in our denser urban areas with high transit demand. However, successful small city and rural routes that operate fewer hours can also perform super well in this measure. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we have our targets and thresholds. And our right-hand side are the examples. So through this part of the presentation, obviously the examples are there to get a look at how we're doing. But the main part of what, moving forward, what we're approving are the targets and thresholds on the left. And just as a way so I know we're going to concentrate on the right as well, but there will be a summary at the end that we can look at and see how all of the routes are performing with all of these in consideration. So yes.
Should there be an aspirational target?
An aspiration there could.
Because now we're comparing ourselves.
Above target, you mean?
Yeah, a goal or something. Should we be shooting for on 232 to 27 or 30 or something? And
yeah. So rather than just like don't fall behind this, like what is it that
what does it take to get us to be better?
Yeah.
In what we're doing.
And I think that would be great for this document to have that in there. But this is for the service change process, kind of identifying when we fall below this. Because we can set our goals wherever, but if we fall below this, that's when we need to take a more critical look and see what's going on.
This is Mayor Lund. I just want to jump in. I support the general sentiment behind Scott's line of questioning there. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
So we will take that. Look at what are those? It's a little different than whether we need to go through our service change to do things. Right. Nevertheless, there is something we should be doing.
Eric's got a question.
Hello, Eric.
No, right here.
Click on chat to see it all.
Is there anyone that's able to do that? So I don't have to move on screens.
So Eric was wondering, do you have a breakdown of boardings per revenue hour that breaks out Bellingham from separate areas in the county, whether it's a per city or county area?
So we do not do it by area at this point. So it's by route, but we can, that's something like if there's a data request for that, I can certainly pull that. But right now we're breaking down these by typology. So we're looking at frequent service. These are all operational in Bellingham. Yeah.
But the typology also lends itself to looking at the county and city, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, it in a way does, like the local, urban, and the frequent are all concentrated within the city of Bellingham. So in a way, it breaks it down automatically.
Yeah. So by
By
looking at route, you can see that this is in the county, this is in the city. Okay.
And
I have a question.
Yeah.
As we're going on here, First, I got to say that the link that's in our packet to the Chrome version of this thing is just, it's amazing, the graphics and the detail. So congrats for that and thanks. But I guess I'm not sure how to use all this information, so I can look at two routes, or one route, and it's meeting the standards in terms of population criteria. It's failing in terms of frequency or service span. It's kind of mixed in terms of cost per boarding and miles and revenue per revenue hour. Like, how do we use all these metrics, or which metrics do we put the most priority on to evaluate things? Because they can look good on some and not on.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a combination of everything. I don't know. I don't think a single target will have more priority over another. When we think about the service things, population and access to opportunity, those aren't going to be changing very often because we rely on census data and areas to add new establishments. So those targets are going to stay rather static, but these are the ones that are going to change a little bit more often.
Hey, Jen, you can't see me. Can I interject?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So there will be a table here at the end, I believe, where it has all of the kind of standards and they're color coded. And implicitly, they are weighted equally, right? So
You want me to scroll down?
yeah, so I mean, my point is they don't need to be weighted evenly. It's not stated that they're all treated evenly, but they're displayed graphically as if they are sort of an equal weight consideration. But if we wanted to say that cost per boarding, for example, is twice as important as boardings per hour, or maybe only 1.5, right? We could weight these if we wanted to. I see this over and over again. People come up with really good criteria. There's nothing wrong with criteria, but there's always this implicit equality of rating. And there doesn't need to be. On the other hand, coming up with weighting that isn't equal, that's a big value-laden exercise, which would take a lot of time and may be difficult to reach consensus. So I just want to say that I think weighting is really important, but I think it's also difficult to agree on.
Oh, this is Les. For our initial purposes was to try to get this set up and then see where there are areas that, like you see a couple there that are all in the red, salmon, whatever that color is, that then we know how to prioritize and know, okay, these are ones we need to start looking at, and then move into more sophisticated ways of looking at, like, okay, how do we weight those? And then also one of the things too is it may trigger discussion like, oh, it's red, but there's more development coming in the future, so maybe we don't want to do that, but at least it triggers us. But we can certainly look at the next iteration on the weighting.
Jen, do you mind if I interject again?
Please.
So this is a geeky thing for you and I mostly, Michael. But one of the things you can do is you can run a variety of weighting schemes and then see whether or not the rankings or the thresholds are sensitive to weighting. You do 5 weighting schemes that they all tell you the exact same thing. It can basically tell you that weighting isn't the issue. The issue is the real situation. It's not very sensitive to adjusting something up or down. So that's a way of determining whether or not it's worth your time and trouble to go through a weighting exercise at all.
Yeah, and just initial thoughts there is, in my perspective, the weighting is kind of this final table where everything comes together, and where you see things are failing or not meeting our targets or exceeding our targets all the way across the board, and then that's your priority right there, and then you can see because if you address one of these things, you're likely going to address all the other issues as well.
And so can I ask about the problem child? When I went through, there it is up there, route number 4.
Yeah.
2 things here. One is a gut check, right? If it turns out our measures and standards highlight a route as kind of the problem child, but in our own minds, the actual on-ground experience is that the route isn't actually that bad off, that it's pretty valuable, then that would lead me to go back and question our measures and our standards. Right. If on the other hand, it's like, yeah, we kind of always knew the route 4 had some issues. So the question is, does staff in their kind of their own personal perception agree that they're not surprised that Route 4 showed up? And then my other question is, why is it showing up so poorly? Because I look at that route and it seems like it runs really good places.
Right. And then I think,
Can I follow?
go ahead.
Yeah, follow up on, because that's sort of what I was trying to get at. And by the way, truth in advertising, that is my route. So I don't think it's failing. But on this metric, yeah, you know, it's red or salmon or whatever. But if you go back to the beginning of the document, it's meeting the equity goals that we have. So I mean, there's no weighting that. It's sort of a policy. Do we look at these as succeeding or failing based on these metrics, when in some of the other metrics in the document,
And that's where I think a lot of the staff input and the local knowledge comes into play, you know, because that's a really hard route to pull, because it serves the hospital and in between these core areas, and it serves some of our low income areas as well, through you know, Birchwood and all of that. So it's a really, you know, great route as far as equity goes, but performance wise, we think it's trying to do too much. It goes, you know, it's pretty circuitous. It's not a direct route. So if you're trying to take it from one part of town north to south, it's not the most enjoyable route, because you have to take a couple loops around. But yeah, so that's where the conversation comes in. You know, this isn't saying we cut this route right off the bat. This means we look and we consider all aspects of that. We look at the equity stuff. We look at the local knowledge. We think about, you know, our customers, and then we make a decision. But, you know, there's clearly something that we could do to maybe bring some of these.
But going back to my first question, is this a surprise, or did staff already understand that 4 was challenged in some way?
Not a surprise.
I haven't been like, no. So
Okay, if it's not a surprise, then that in a certain sense is a validation of the operationalization of performance. If the numbers make sense to you after you run them, then maybe you develop them correctly.
Right.
And what excites me about all this is exactly this conversation, is it now gives us something to work from, to say, okay, we've now identified these areas. Okay, what are the elements to go into it? How does it balance with the equity and the priority populations, with the cost, and this gives us a framework to have those discussions and some data for the board to be able to see when we're trying to weigh those discussions.
Let me see if I've got Michael's example in my head. Those are just the raw numbers up there, right?
Yeah.
And so what I hear you saying is those are the raw numbers, but in your evaluation of that route, there's other things to be considered.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's kind of like
You
a
just expand
flagging
the table
exercise.
and put the equity measures on the same table, and those would be coded green.
Right.
The service standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how the service and performance and design standards will all work
Right.
together to be able to have that comprehensive look. And so, for example, from a service review standard, this now gives us an opportunity to say, okay, we need to look at the 4. And if somebody says, well, why are you looking at the 4? We can lay this out and say, here's why we're doing this. And then there's the layer that Scott mentioned about, okay, how do we put the aspirational things?
Correct. Yeah.
Layer that on top as well.
Yeah, so we can go back, but I think, you know, that table that we were just looking at is the most important. We have all of these.
I think Mayor Lund had a question.
Ready for the question.
It's just a comment, and I think this is because I spent years in statistical process control, and that's essentially what we're doing with lower control limits that we're defining here. And I'm just curious about, I mean, essentially what we can do now is just change certain variables on that route to see how we're netting. And I'm just wondering if there's actions that you've already identified for that route.
Yeah, so the different solutions will, you know, will come through
Works.
deeper analysis. So this flags them, then we look into the issues. Are there certain segments of the run that are having trouble? Are there areas that aren't having much ridership? Are the run times too long? So then we look into solutions, whether they're design oriented. They could be realignments. They could be schedule changing. That's reducing trips, adding more trips, or changing the hours of which those trips are. So scheduling stuff. And then, there's a plethora of different things, removing stops to allow buses to, run through quicker, make on-time performance better. So these will allow us to take a deeper look into the very specific data that we get from all of our buses. What's that?
Guys are headed into the service plan
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah, so we're heading into the service planning cycle, and we have our service planning process that will actually be a segment of this document that won't be this long. It'll just have all of our targets set out. So then we bring all of these issues to our service review committee and try to hash things out with operations staff, with facility staff, marketing staff, and planning, and try to find ways to, whether it's improve that route or cut the service or, Yeah, of course you can.
So I think one thing that this table, Mary Anderson, transit planner at WTA. If you remember the June 2024 service changes where we were looking at the Linden Hop and the Route 26 and the 24 and the 29. And so I think this table shows the justification of why we were looking at adjusting some of the service in the Cordata area for Route 29 and 24. So you can see that 29 is currently in the red or in the salmon, and hopefully in another year, when we look at this, it'll at least be in the yellow, both the 24, and the 29 in the yellow, if not both in the green. So it's good, I guess, validation for the work that we've already done and the work that you've already approved. And then I also wanted to just make a quick comment about the kind of gut check you asked about, Michael, about the Route 4. And even before I was at WTA, the hospital has always been a challenging place for us to serve and a place that we must serve. And so that's one that we've tried a lot of different things. And I remember looking at this route maybe like a couple of years ago, and each segment of the route was actually doing pretty good, like pretty equal. And that's the part that as transit planners is the hardest. It's like, well, this part's good, this part's good, this part's good, and it all adds up to kind of mediocre, unfortunately. But there are some construction projects that are happening that'll help us to be able to drive our buses on different roads, and who knows, maybe a better partnership with St. Joe's as well that can help make that route be stronger in the future.
I think part of that, what Mary's hitting on too, is it helps us identify where are the barriers, what are the issues, and then we can help to define solutions to do that. Okay, maybe on the hospital route, it is St. Joe's. Okay, it highlights, okay, we need to go talk more with the hospital, with the city, those kinds of things, land use planning, all those kinds of things that all move together.
Or maybe it's determined that route is valuable enough that we
Exactly.
have to keep it going.
Yes. Yep.
Great. Yeah. So I don't think it'd be worth going
Through all of these, and they're all been provided to you. But if there's any particular questions and comments, I think it's just fun to look at all these things and look at the comparison between passenger miles and boardings per revenue hour. So we have our really high efficient routes in town that have a lot of boardings, but then we have longer routes like that go out to the county that don't have as many stops. But people are riding a lot longer. So you have someone going from here to Kendall, that's one trip that's extremely far, rather than someone that's, going 2 blocks in the Western neighborhood. So it's like, how do we compare these things and look at them? So Yeah, there's these things kind of go, we have the revenue hour and then the cost. Obviously they correlate, but there are discrepancies in there as well that are unique. Yes.
So WTA has faced some criticism by people who are worried about whether or not we're spending public dollars wisely enough for public benefit. And they're looking at like buses that may not be entirely full. They're wondering for misspending. And probably the best answer to that isn't included here. And can we get to it? It was halfway got to the priority populations. And the best answer is this is delivering huge, enormous benefit in terms of the productivity and quality of life and economic benefit by the people who ride the bus, who now go to work, who now do their shopping and otherwise wouldn't be able to. It could be that there is a certain sense we are enabling, I'll make a number, you know, $450 million worth of economic activity in Whatcom County directly depends upon these priority populations. That is a huge argument. What are those numbers? Is there some way we can have someone estimate the economic benefit to the entire economy? Because I say that we're serving there, this is a route which serves the priority populations. Everybody goes, well, that sounds really nice. I feel good about that in my warm tummy. But if then if I turn to the bean counters who are worried about how we're spending money and say, yeah, and I've also just generated hundreds of millions of dollars of economic activity or supported it, and they go, oh, okay, money well spent. Mm-hmm. Can we get to that kind of economic benefit, and how do we do that?
Yeah, I think we can.
Because the ball's in my court. Yes. I'm the, well, yes. So the answer to your question is yes, there are folks that do that. And so
can they do it route by route? Can we use something like what Michael has done here and kind of estimate the economic impact of particular kinds of routes?
Yes. I would assume yes. I haven't asked that question because we're in the process of trying to procure somebody to do that, but that'll be one of the questions that we will ask. But my guess would be yes, because then you're seeing out to Linden, for example, okay, where is that going? How many people are riding it? Where are they going? What industries are served? Those kinds of things that do factor into the economic benefit, as well as from the agency perspective of buying fuel, employment, the direct and indirect jobs that are created by that because you're serving an industrial area or, you know, those kinds of things. So very long-winded way of saying yes. Sorry.
And the chart that I have on the computer right now, so I think this is the closest we come to be able to talk about that discussion right here. So if we look at the 72X providing nearly 100 passenger miles per hour, you compare that to any of our in-town services and they're not even nearly close to that. So, you know, those getting people from way out in the county that have no other option to get into town and then working their jobs here in Bellingham. I mean, that's a great service and a great economic benefit for the city of Bellingham, but the county all around.
Can you send this out to the board?
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, so this will be.
Here, I thought I just missed
some. There should be a link in the packet, but we will highlight it and send it back out again.
I think the link in the packet comes to something slightly different than this.
So this was altered for today. So with the presentation was going to be strictly on performance, but I included the whole enchilada. Tim's words, not mine. And
we also included the earlier link to the previous analysis.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at link 1, that was the initial presentation, and then link 2 is what you call the something-based targets, the policy-based targets. And so that's the evolution from system average-based targets to policy-based targets, comparing link 1 to link 2.
And then we'll have a PDF that has all of this in, you know, the boring text version.
But yes, we'll send it up. We'll package it up. So just to make sure are we headed in the right direction to bring back to the board next week or 2 weeks to talk about approving these? The goal is, we know they're not perfect, but to get something to start us being able to look at things. We can make some modifications as we go. And this will be an iterative process with the board. We'll be coming back and reporting as well. But don't want to get out ahead of the board if you need some more time to think and talk. Looks like
Kim, do you have
maybe-
another question?
Oh, I just want to say, I think this is absolutely the right direction, and I expect we will be making changes as we go, but this is fantastic.
Thank you. All credit goes to Michael and Tim and Mary and the team. Fantastic job thinking this through.
So thank you so much. I think it gave us a lot of information to kind of process and chew over. If there's any other questions, you can email Tim or Michael, and then we'll review this for approval of the evaluation standards at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing more on that, we'll move to annual IT cybersecurity update from Jeremy.
Hello. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, as a best practice for IT, we do a annual cybersecurity report, which we give to the general manager and the board. We gave the briefing to Les a couple weeks ago, and then weather kind of happened, and now we're here. So just going to give you a brief highlight of that report today. Ransomware continues to be a primary concern for us, and we've taken a number of steps in 2023 to combat that and reduce our risk. We migrated from traditional antivirus to an endpoint detection and response system, or an EDR. In conjunction with that, we employed a third-party security operations center for 24/7 monitoring and response to that. And then in addition, we've hardened our security for our primary transit database. And then we're completing today enforcement of multi-factor authentication for external access to our web resources. Earlier in 2023, we had all employees with email required MFA. And then today we'll lock that down for everyone, including people like transit operators who access our SharePoint website and other resources. We're implementing the Center for Internet Security's cybersecurity controls. There's 18 of those with 3 levels of maturity. We're focusing on the top 4 that have been identified as the most effective controls, and then we'll continue through those other controls as we get to them. Starting in Q4 of 2023, we engaged with the State Auditor's Office for a cybersecurity audit. So we're working with them, should be completed in February of this year, where they have looked at our focus on our critical security controls, how we're implementing those, and then they're doing some penetration testing and some analysis of our systems. We expect all that to give us a fair bit of data and recommendations on what we can do to improve that. It's not an audit like a fiscal audit. There's no findings, but they basically give us a list of things. They say, here's what you need to do, and here's how to improve. Once we have that completed in February, we're going to integrate that into our 2024 work plan and beyond, most likely. Our 2024 work plan will address 7 program areas with 14 projects. Most of those are already underway. And then we have full support of the agency in our security program and our improvements, which is great. Sometimes other places might get pushback on changes like this. And then in 2023, we had 2 minor security incidents, which we used as learning opportunities, and which we improved security around our email system and some of our Microsoft Office 365 services as a result of that. That's a big briefing. Is there any questions?
If I could just say thank you to Jeremy and Josh for leading this effort. There's from the training piece to the exercising piece where we do get phishing that are tests to see how we react and things. it's a great program, and they're definitely leading the effort. But to highlight, as Jeremy said, to highlight what Jeremy said, this is an agency-wide effort, and everybody takes ownership of it, which is, I think, a pretty cool thing. And they realize that it's not just IT; it's all of us that are working on this. And we are seeing, I think, an increase in phishing emails that are coming in. And while I was down at Worcester, got a phone call saying, "Hey, did you send me an email asking me to go buy stuff?" And, so it is happening more. And Jeremy and Josh are putting in great policies, procedures, and tactics to do things. And then it's all of our responsibility to make sure we're following those. There's just an article this morning on the constant, even from foreign governments, targeting transportation systems. So it's a really important thing that we're doing, and I'm rambling now because I was told that I talked too much. So I'm going to scale back and just say thank you.
Good, thanks.
Thank you so much. And now moving on to the general manager's report. Les?
Yes, thank you. We just got back from the Washington State Transit Association, had their first quarter meeting. Good to see where things are in relation to the state. I left there feeling WTA with our initiatives is making good progress on where we're going, and looking at many of these things that we've been talking about. How do we create an operating environment that encourages and enhances and makes the system better for people to use, that then hopefully will have the outcome of driving ridership, and where WTA is going, I think is in a good way. So I felt good coming back from that. One of the things that came up there was we received a briefing from the World Cup 2026. Seattle and the West Coast are hosting the World Cup. But it was interesting to talk about the potential effects from that. One of the things they said is during that month in 26, June, July, that there could be upwards of 750,000 more people using I-5 and trying to get, because games are in Seattle as well as Vancouver, BC. And so that corridor there, and they actually highlighted Bellingham International Airport as a place where people may be flying into to get to those Vancouver games and maybe the Seattle games, because it's a midpoint sort of for those. So that highlighted to us that we need to start thinking of that and reach out to some partners to try to judge what the scope and scale of that could be, and how from a WTA perspective for that month it may affect us. So anyway, I wanted to highlight that because that was new, and that could affect many of you and your cities as well. They said hotels are going to be at a premium, so who knows? Mayor Cortes, you may be seeing people filling up your because they can get right across the border from Linden. So that was interesting. Then we also met while we were down there. Maureen and I met with our legislative delegation from the 40th and 42nd. Got a lot of support and validation for these initiatives that we have in our budget, and the outcomes that we're trying to drive towards, pardon the pun, or pun intended, I guess I'll say. So driving towards things like improving access to education, jobs, medical care, allowing people to age in place, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, trying to encourage affordable housing, and that is part of a transportation network of walkable, bikeable, and busable, if you will, neighborhoods, trying to come up with solutions to help alleviate traffic as population grows. And then to Michael's point about supporting economic growth and how do we document those. So it was a good visit, got a lot of support. They're interested in ways that we can help. We didn't have an ask for this year, but going into next year, they would like to talk after session, heading in on, okay, what are those asks going into next year? I guess one of the things we did ask is supporting Whatcom County's policy about using the Economic Development Investment Program funding for workforce affordable housing and expanding that program as well. So that went well. I think we talked about the winter events at the last one because we went remote because we were in the midst of a winter event. So with that, I will pause for questions. I'm not seeing any in here, Jen.
I don't see any either. So with that, oh, okay. Mayor Lund is leaving to make her 9 a.m. Next meeting. Any other business that needs to be brought before the board?
Thanks for covering, Madam Vice Chair.
I was intending to be in person this morning, but my morning just didn't work out that way, but I'm glad I was able to jump online. Any other announcements? Not seeing any. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Want to hang out a bit more?
Yeah, I want to stay here another hour.
Donuts aren't gone yet, so.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. No one can leave till the donuts are gone. Anyway, okay, so the official meeting is adjourned. If you would like to stay and socialize, that is on your time. But I appreciate everyone working so hard to put all the information together, and we will see you next time.